Hi there. Welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight, we're standing in a cramped medieval bedroom where the straw mattress reeks of mildew and something's definitely moving in the rushes on the floor. You're about to discover that in medieval times, enjoying intimacy as a woman wasn't just frowned upon. It could literally get you killed. And honestly, given the hygiene standards of the era, you probably won't survive this journey with your modern sensibilities intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments below. Now, let's drift back in time. You're lying in your medieval bed, trying to catch a moment of privacy with your spouse. When you hear it, the telltale creak of floorboards outside your door, your heart races because you know exactly what this means. In medieval Europe, your bedroom isn't really yours at all. It's a stage for community surveillance, where every moan, every whispered endearment, every moment of passion becomes potential evidence against you. The church has installed an elaborate system of monitoring that would make modern surveillance states jealous. Your parish priest expects you to confess every intimate detail of your marital relations during mandatory confessions. He's been trained with surprisingly specific questions. Did you enjoy it too much? Did you assume any positions other than the church-approved missionary? Did you, heaven forbid, initiate the encounter yourself? These aren't casual inquiries. Your priest keeps mental notes, sometimes written ones, about which women in his flock seem too enthusiastic about their marital duties. He's been instructed by his superiors to watch for signs of excessive carnality in women, which church doctrine claims leads directly to witchcraft, adultery, and the corruption of the entire community. But the priest is just one set of eyes watching you. Your neighbors have turned snooping into an art form. Medieval homes aren't built for privacy. Thin walls, shared courtyards, and communal living spaces mean everyone knows everyone else's business. That gossipy widow next door. She's timing how long your husband stays in your bed. The baker's wife. She's noted that you've been looking particularly flushed lately. Even your own servants, if you're wealthy enough to have them, are expected to report any suspicious bedroom activities to either the church authorities or your husband's family. You learn to stifle every sound, to keep your face carefully neutral during the day, to never admit that you actually anticipate your husband's visits, and because here's the thing historians still argue about. Exactly how much of this surveillance was official church policy versus community-driven moral policing. What we know for certain is that women bore the brunt of it. The really twisted part? Some communities actually conducted bedroom inspections. Yes, you heard that right. Church officials or appointed moral guardians could literally enter your bedroom to ensure it was set up in a properly chaste manner. Too many pillows? That suggests luxury and sensuality. Perfume sheets, clear evidence of wanton behavior, a mirror near the bed. You might as well hang a sign saying harlot lives here. These inspections weren't random. They usually followed rumors or accusations, often from those helpful neighbors I mentioned. Maybe you smiled too much at the market. Maybe you wore your hair a certain way. Maybe you just looked too healthy and happy for a properly God-fearing woman. Any of these could trigger a visit from the moral authorities. The morning after one of these delightful bedroom inspections, you find yourself walking through the village square, acutely aware of how every woman around you is trapped in the same impossible game. Medieval society has created 3 boxes for women: virgin, mother, or whore. There's no fourth option, no nuanced middle ground. and definitely no box labeled human being with normal desires. You must fit into one category. But here's the catch. Each box comes with rules that make it impossible to win. Let's say you're in the virgin box. Congratulations. You're pure and valuable, like a pristine piece of property waiting to be transferred from father to husband. But wait, you're also suspected of being prideful, cold, and unnatural. Why aren't you married yet? What's wrong with you? Are you secretly lustful and hiding it? Church authorities write endless treatises about how virgins are actually the most susceptible to demonic possession because their unused wombs make them hysterical. Yes, they literally believe your uterus wanders around your body causing trouble if you don't put it to its proper use. So you get married and enter the mother box. Finally, respectability. Except now you're walking a tightrope thinner than a strand of hair. You must desire your husband enough to conceive children, but not too much. Or you're a lustful creature. You must submit to his advances, but not enjoy them. Or you're corrupting him with your carnality. You must be fruitful and multiply. But if you have too many children too quickly, clearly you're having too much sex. And if you don't conceive, obviously you're either barren, your fault, or secretly using witchcraft to prevent pregnancy, also your fault. The third box, the whore category, is where they throw any woman who doesn't fit neatly into the other two. Enjoyed your wedding night a little too obviously. Whore, widow who remarried too quickly. Whore, woman who knows too much about herbs and healing. Definitely a whore, probably also a witch. This box is surprisingly crowded because medieval authorities are remarkably creative about what qualifies as whore-like behavior. You watch a young bride in the market, probably 15 years old, trying desperately to navigate these categories. She keeps her eyes downcast, virginal, rests her hand on her slightly swelling belly, motherly, but then makes the mistake of laughing at something her husband whispers. The laugh is too loud, too genuine, too full of joy. You see the older women exchange glances. That girl just crossed an invisible line. The truly maddening part is that these categories aren't stable. You can be shoved from one box to another based on rumors, accidents, or just bad luck. Take poor Lady Isabella, a real historical figure from 13th century England. Married young, she dutifully produced 3 children for her lord husband. Perfect mother material, right? But when her husband died in battle, she grieved for exactly 6 months. The church approved mourning period, then accepted a marriage proposal from a younger knight. The speed of her acceptance, combined with reports that she seemed too eager for the marriage bed, got her reclassified from respectable widow to shameless whore overnight. Historians still debate whether these rigid categories were primarily about controlling female sexuality or about maintaining property rights and bloodlines. The boring academic answer is probably both, but that doesn't capture the daily reality of living under this system. You're not thinking about property law when you're trying to figure out exactly how much enthusiasm is acceptable when your husband approaches you. You're just trying to survive. The church helpfully provides guidance, of course. Saint Jerome writes that a woman who enjoys marital relations too much is committing adultery with her own husband. Think about that for a second. You can cheat on your spouse, with your spouse. The mental gymnastics required to navigate this logic would exhaust an Olympic athlete. Meanwhile, your actual body, the thing with actual nerve endings and actual responses, doesn't care about theological categories. It just knows what feels good. And that natural knowledge becomes your most dangerous enemy. The real kicker? Men don't have these boxes. Sure, they're supposed to avoid excessive lust too. But boys will be boys, right? A man who enjoys his wife is just healthy and vigorous. A man who visits prostitutes is unfortunate but understandable. A man who fathers illegitimate children is sowing wild oats. The same actions that destroy a woman's entire existence are minor speed bumps in a man's life. You wake up one morning to find your neighbor Margaret being dragged from her house by armed men, her night shift torn, her feet bare against the frozen mud. Her crime? Last week, during confession, she made the mistake of admitting to Father Bernard that she sometimes felt warm stirrings when her husband touched her. That confession has now been transformed into evidence of witchcraft, because in medieval logic, a woman who enjoys physical pleasure is obviously in league with Satan himself. The equation is simple and terrifying. Female pleasure equals witchcraft. The church scholars have worked it all out with impressive precision. They explain that when Eve ate the apple in Eden, she cursed all women with insatiable lust. This lust makes women vulnerable to demonic possession. Demons enter through the womb, where else? And corrupt women's souls by amplifying their natural desires. Therefore, any woman who shows signs of enjoying intimate relations is potentially a witch. You've memorized the warning signs they preach from every pulpit. Does a woman initiate physical contact with her husband? Possible witch. Does she make sounds of pleasure during marital relations? Probable witch. Does she know positions beyond the church-sanctioned missionary style? Definite witch. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch Hunter's Handbook, dedicates entire chapters to the connection between female sexuality and dark magic. The book's authors, two German monks who clearly had some issues to work through, write extensively about how witches steal men's penises and keep them in birds' nests. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apparently, sexually empowered women are so threatening that medieval men genuinely believe they can magically detach and kidnap male genitalia. The penis-stealing witch becomes a widespread panic, with men across Europe checking their nests. Checking for nests, in increasing paranoia. But beyond the absurdity lies real danger. You know women who've been accused of witchcraft for the crime of healing too effectively with herbs, clearly magical knowledge, for remaining attractive past 40, unnatural preservation through devil packs, or for refusing a man's advances. Obviously, she's already pledged to Satan. The common thread? These are all women who display some form of power or autonomy over their own bodies. The interrogations are where the pleasure-witchcraft connection becomes explicitly horrific. Witch hunters, usually celibate clergy who've spent way too much time thinking about female sexuality, devise tests specifically focused on women's capacity for physical sensation. They search for the devil's mark, supposedly an area of skin that feels no pain, proving demonic possession. In practice, this means women are stripped, shaved, and pricked with needles across every inch of their bodies, while male authorities watch for reactions. The water test works on similar principles. They bind a woman and throw her in the river. If she floats, the water, being holy, has rejected her sinful body, which, if she sinks and drowns, she was innocent. Oops. But here's the detail they don't mention in your average history book. Before the dunking, they often strip the woman naked, ostensibly to remove any hidden charms, but really as another form of sexual humiliation designed to prove that female bodies are inherently corrupted. You learn to hide any sign of physical enjoyment like your life depends on it, because it literally does. When your husband reaches for you at night, you lie still as a corpse. When the midwife asks if you need anything for pain during childbirth, you insist that suffering is God's will. When you accidentally moan during a particularly good stretch after working in the fields, you quickly turn it into a prayer. Historians still argue about exact numbers, but most agree that tens of thousands of women died during the European witch hunts, with peaks in the 16th and 17th centuries. What percentage were accused specifically because of perceived sexual impropriety? The records are frustratingly vague, often just listing congress with the devil or unnatural acts. But when you read between the lines of trial transcripts, the obsession with female pleasure becomes undeniable. The most chilling part. This isn't just ignorant peasants believing in superstition. The greatest theological minds of the age genuinely believe that female orgasm serves no purpose in conception. They're wrong. But that's medieval medicine for you. Therefore, any pleasure women experience is purely selfish. Therefore, it must be demonic. University-educated men write lengthy treatises about how the clitoris is Satan's doorbell. I wish I were making that up. Your friend Eleanor hasn't been seen at market for 3 weeks now, and when you finally spot her, she's pale as parchment, walking like each step causes agony. You don't need to ask what happened. You recognize the aftermath of Dr. Bartholomew's treatment for excessive female desire. Her husband, concerned that she was showing too much enthusiasm in the marriage bed, paid good money for the physician to cure her unfortunate condition. The medical establishment of medieval Europe has developed an impressive arsenal of treatments for women who enjoy sex too much. These learned men, who've studied at prestigious universities and can quote Galen and Aristotle in the original Greek, approach female desire like a disease to be cured. Their remedies range from the merely unpleasant to the potentially fatal, all backed by the unshakable certainty that comes from never having to experience them yourself. Bloodletting tops the list of popular treatments. The theory goes like this. Women's bodies are naturally cold and wet, unlike men's hot and dry constitutions. But sexual pleasure creates unnatural heat in the female form. This excess heat must be drained away before it corrupts the entire system. So physicians slice open veins, usually in the arm or foot, and let the heated blood flow out. They measure success by how close to fainting the patient comes. The weaker she is, the less likely she'll have energy for those troublesome desires. But maybe you're lucky and your family calls in a more progressive doctor, one who prefers herbal remedies. He'll prescribe a delightful cocktail of herbs designed to cool your ardor: lettuce seed, water lily, rue, and camphor, mixed with vinegar and applied to your genitals. Yes, you're essentially douching with medieval salad dressing. The burning sensation means it's working, apparently. Some physicians add ground-up willow leaves, which actually contain a mild painkiller, though not nearly enough to counter the effects of the vinegar. The truly dedicated doctors combine multiple approaches. First, they'll purge you with powerful laxatives because nothing kills the mood quite like violent intestinal distress. Then come the cold baths, not just cool water, but ice-cold streams in winter, sometimes requiring you to sit waist-deep until your lips turn blue. After that, it's time for the restricted diet. No red meat, too heating. No spices, obviously inflammatory. No wine, loosens moral fiber. And definitely no eggs, shaped suspiciously like testicles, therefore aphrodisiac. Prayer marathons represent the spiritual side of medical treatment. A woman diagnosed with excessive desire might be prescribed 12 hours of kneeling on cold stone floors, reciting Ave Marias until her knees bleed and her voice cracks. The physical discomfort supposedly redirects the mind from carnal thoughts to holy contemplation. Some creative physicians recommend wearing hair shirts during intercourse. Nothing quite kills the mood like having coarse goat hair scratching your skin raw while you're trying to fulfill your marital duties. The real medical pioneers go beyond treating symptoms to preventing the disease entirely. Young girls showing any signs of precociousness might undergo preventative treatment, tight binding of the chest to prevent breast development, sleeping on hard boards to discourage softness, and regular doses of bitter herbs to suppress any stirrings of sexuality before they begin. Some physicians recommend cauterizing the clitoris with hot irons. Though this remains controversial even by medieval standards, not because it's barbaric, mind you, but because some doctors worry it might accidentally increase sensation before destroying it. Historians debate whether these treatments were primarily punitive or genuinely medical in intent. The frustrating answer is both. Medieval physicians absolutely believe they're helping, even as they inflict tortures that would make professional interrogators squeamish. They write earnest medical treatises about the dangers of female orgasm, complete with case studies of women driven mad by their own pleasure. You learn to fake illness to avoid worse illness. When your husband mentions your seemingly increased appetite for his attentions, you quickly develop a convenient headache. When the priest notes your glowing complexion, you mention your recent fasting and prayer vigils. It's a delicate balance. Appear too healthy and happy, and you need treatment for excessive vitality, and appear too sick, and you might be suspected of using your feminine wiles to avoid your marital duties. The treatments don't work. Of course, human biology remains stubbornly resistant to theological medicine, but they do succeed in their real purpose, making women associate pleasure with pain, desire with danger, and their own bodies with betrayal. Eleanor never quite recovers her spark after Dr. Bartholomew's cure. She fulfills her wifely obligations with mechanical precision now, her eyes carefully empty, her body still as stone. The doctor considers this a complete success. The town crier's bell rings through the square as you hurry past with your market basket, but the announcement makes you freeze mid-step. Lady Catherine has been caught in bed with the stable master, and tomorrow at noon, she'll face her punishment in the public square. You already know what's coming. You've seen this theatrical production before. What you've never seen is Lord Robert facing anything similar for his well-known affairs with half the serving girls in the county. The double standard for adultery in medieval times isn't just unfair. It's encoded into law with mathematical precision. In most regions, a woman caught in adultery faces public humiliation, loss of property, physical punishment, and social death. Her husband can legally kill her in some jurisdictions if he catches her in the act. Meanwhile, a man caught in adultery might pay a fine, maybe, if the wronged husband is particularly influential. On Tuesdays, the reasoning behind this disparity would be hilarious if it weren't so devastating. Church lawyers explain that when a woman commits adultery, she threatens the very foundation of society by potentially introducing illegitimate children into bloodlines. When a man commits adultery, he's just being a man. Boys will be boys, even when those boys are 50-year-old lords with 3 mistresses and a dozen bastards. The law literally states that male adultery is a minor sin of weakness, while female adultery is a crime against God, nature, and property rights. You've memorized the standard punishments because every woman has to know them for survival. First comes the head shaving. Nothing says adulteress, quite like a bald woman in a world where hair is considered a woman's crowning glory. Then the stripping, because apparently justice requires nudity. The lucky ones get to keep their shifts. The unlucky ones get paraded naked through town. The procession follows a specific route designed for maximum humiliation, past the church, through the market, around the well where all the gossips gather. But wait, there's more. Some regions require the adulteress to carry a specific object during her walk of shame. In parts of France, it's a dead fish, symbolizing how she stinks of sin. In certain German towns, she carries hot stones, one for each time she allegedly cuckolded her husband. In England, they might lock her in the pillory and encourage the crowd to throw rotten vegetables, though historians debate whether the authorities provided the vegetables or if people brought their own. The most creative punishments come from Italy, where they've elevated adultery shaming to an art form. In some cities, the guilty woman must ride backwards on a donkey while wearing a pointed cap decorated with bells. Each bell ring announces her shame to anyone who might have missed the spectacle. In Venice, they might force her to run naked between two rows of people armed with switches. Think of it as a particularly vindictive gauntlet. Meanwhile, Lord Robert continues his affairs without consequence. Oh, sure. Father Francis might give him a stern talking to during confession. He might have to pay a small fine to the church, framed as a charitable donation. In extreme cases, where he's been particularly flagrant, he might have to go on a pilgrimage, which everyone knows is just an excuse to have affairs in different cities along the route. The legal documents from the period reveal the absurdity in black and white. A man's adultery is only considered serious if he brings his mistress into the marital home, flaunts the relationship publicly, or neglects his financial duties to his wife. Even then, the punishment focuses on compensating the wronged wife, not punishing the adulterer. It's treated as a property dispute, not a moral failing. Women don't even have the luxury of killing their husbands when caught in flagrante. That's murder, plain and simple. But men who kill their wives in the same situation often face reduced sentences or acquittal entirely. The law recognizes heat of passion when it's male passion. Female passion, as we've established, is probably witchcraft. You watch Lady Catherine's punishment the next day, standing in the crowd because absence would be noted and questioned. She walks with her head high despite her shorn scalp, her shift clinging to her body, where they've doused her with bucket after bucket of cold water. The crowd jeers and throws things, but you notice how many women throw softly, their vegetables landing far from their target. Every woman here knows it could be her next time, not because we're all adulteresses, but because accusation is 9/10 of the law when it comes to female sexuality. You're kneeling in the confessional, palms sweating, trying to remember exactly how to phrase your sins to avoid triggering Father Augustine's notorious follow-up questions. Last month, young Mary made the mistake of confessing to impure thoughts, and the priest kept her in that wooden box for 3 hours, demanding she describe every single detail of those thoughts, when they occurred, what triggered them, and whether she touched herself while thinking them. She emerged sobbing, and hasn't been quite right since. The church courts have turned the sacred act of confession into an interrogation technique that would make modern intelligence agencies take notes. These priests, supposedly celibate men who've devoted their lives to spiritual matters, have developed an obsessively detailed curiosity about what happens in marriage beds across their parishes. They're armed with confession manuals that read like medieval sex surveys, complete with questions so specific they'd make a gynecologist blush. When you lie with your husband, Father Augustine begins, his voice carrying that special combination of piety and prurience, do you assume only the natural position ordained by God? You know the correct answer is yes, but you also know he'll demand specifics. What time of day? Are the candles lit or extinguished? Do you keep your shift on? Do you close your eyes and think of the Virgin Mary? Or do you, heaven forbid, look at your husband's face? The interrogation intensifies. Have you ever been on top? This is a trap. The Church considers any position with the woman above to be unnatural and therefore sinful. They have theological justifications involving proper gender hierarchies and the natural flow of seed. But really, it comes down to control. A woman on top is literally elevated above a man. And we can't have that, can we? Do you engage in the marital act during forbidden times? Oh, the forbidden times are: you're supposed to abstain during Lent, Advent, Pentecost, feast days, fast days, Sundays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Also during menstruation, pregnancy, and 40 days after childbirth. When you do the math, that leaves approximately 12 days a year when sex is technically allowed. Historians still debate whether anyone actually followed these rules, or if they were more like spiritual speed limits. Everyone breaks them, but they exist to make you feel guilty about it. The questions get worse. Have you ever used your mouth or hands in ways contrary to nature? Have you attempted to prevent conception through withdrawal or barrier methods? Have you experienced release of feminine seed? Medieval priests are very concerned about female orgasm, which they understand just enough to fear, but not enough to accurately describe. They've read ancient medical texts claiming women produce seed during climax, and they're terrified this might interfere with proper procreation. But the real danger comes when Father Augustine moves beyond the standard questions. Some priests, driven by either genuine theological concern or their own twisted interests, develop specialties. Father Augustine is obsessed with timing and frequency. He wants to know exactly how long each encounter lasts, how often you engage in it, whether your desire increases or decreases with age. He takes mental notes, comparing confessions, building a comprehensive map of his parish's sexual habits. You've heard about the church court in the next town over, where they actually called a woman to testify about her bedroom activities in front of a panel of clergy. She had to stand there, in public, while 5 priests questioned her about whether she'd ever experienced pleasure while her husband was away. The logic was that pleasure, without the possibility of conception, was purely selfish and therefore sinful. The fact that they acquitted her husband of abandonment while condemning her for natural biological responses tells you everything about medieval justice. The confession manuals these priests use are fascinating historical documents. They reveal an obsessive categorization of every possible sexual act, ranked by severity of sin. Rear entry? Mortal sin because it resembles animals. Standing up? Venial sin unless the woman suggested it. Then mortal. In water? Depends on the temperature, apparently. Some manuals include helpful diagrams that definitely weren't drawn by anyone with practical experience. The truly insidious part is how these confessions become evidence in church courts. That private conversation with your spiritual advisor. Not so private when you're accused of adultery, witchcraft, or excessive lust. Priests can be compelled to testify about patterns of confession, and while they're not supposed to reveal specific sins, they find creative ways around that prohibition. I cannot say what she confessed, but I can say her soul was much troubled by matters of the flesh. Might as well be a guilty verdict. The drums start at dawn, a slow, menacing beat that everyone in town recognizes. Today's the day Margaret the baker's wife does her penance walk for the crime of being too vocal during intimate moments with her husband. Her neighbors reported hearing unnatural sounds of pleasure through the thin walls, and now she'll parade through town wearing nothing but a rough shift and a sign declaring her sin. You dress quickly, knowing attendance is mandatory, skip the shaming, and you might be next. These public humiliation parades have become elaborate theatrical productions with established routes, traditional chants, and even preferred vegetables for throwing. Each town develops its own special touches, little flourishes of cruelty that make their shame walks memorable. In your town, they make the woman carry a large wooden phallus, painted bright red, because apparently subtlety died sometime in the 12th century. Other towns prefer different props, oversized wooden spoons for stirring up lust, bells to announce the approach of sin, or dead cats, because actually, no one remembers why dead cats, but tradition is tradition. Margaret emerges from the church where she spent the night purifying herself through prayer and fasting. Her hair, once her pride, has been roughly shorn, leaving ugly patches of scalp showing through. They've dressed her in the traditional garment of shame, a shift made of the roughest possible fabric, designed to scratch and irritate with every step. The sign around her neck reads, "Lustful Wife," in large letters, though half the crowd can't read and just enjoys the spectacle anyway. The procession begins at the church steps, where Father Bernard delivers a thunderous sermon about the dangers of female sexuality. He's really getting into it today, spittle flying as he describes how one woman's excessive pleasure can corrupt an entire community. The crowd murmurs agreement, while secretly thinking about their own bedroom activities and whether they've been too loud lately. You notice several women making mental notes to stuff rags in the gaps between their walls. The route is carefully designed for maximum exposure. First stop, the market square, where all the merchants and their customers can get a good look. The fishmonger, who never misses a shaming, has saved his most rotten produce for the occasion. He lands a putrid mackerel square on Margaret's chest, and the crowd cheers. The unspoken rule is that you're supposed to throw something. Participating proves you're morally upright, but most women aim to miss or choose softer projectiles. Next comes the slow walk past the guild halls, where the important men of the town stand in doorways, shaking their heads in performative disapproval. You notice Master William, who everyone knows keeps a mistress in the next village, looking particularly sanctimonious. The hypocrisy would be funny if Margaret weren't stumbling under the weight of accumulated filth and shame. The parade includes special stops at significant locations. They make her kneel at the well where women gather to gossip, presumably so she can contemplate how her story will be told and retold here. She must circle the stocks 3 times, a reminder that next time the punishment could be worse. At each stop, a town official reads out her crimes in excruciating detail, including a surprisingly specific account of which nights her neighbors heard offensive sounds. The creativity of these punishments varies by region and the vindictiveness of local authorities. In some German towns, they force the woman to wear a special mask called the Schandmask, an iron contraption shaped like a pig's head or devil's face that locks onto the skull. In parts of Spain, they might nail the woman's ear to a post and leave her there for hours, giving her the choice between standing in agony or tearing free and being marked forever. But the real punishment isn't the physical discomfort or even the immediate humiliation. It's the lasting social death. After today, Margaret will be that woman who enjoyed sex too much. Merchants will serve her last. Other women will avoid being seen talking to her. Children will be taught to throw stones at her in the street. Her husband might divorce her, claiming her excessive lust proves she's likely to commit adultery. The church will watch her constantly for signs of relapse. Historians debate whether these public shamings actually deterred the behavior they punished. The evidence suggests not. Human sexuality tends to resist theatrical interventions, but they certainly succeeded in their real purpose, reminding every woman watching that her body, her pleasure, and her private life belong to the community. The message is clear as Margaret stumbles past, covered in filth and tears. This could be you. Sister Agatha watches you from across the convent courtyard, her eyes sharp as flint despite her 70 years. You're the newest arrival at St. Bridget's, sent here by your family after you made the terrible mistake of smiling too warmly at the blacksmith's son. Your parents called it unnatural interest in worldly matters and packed you off to this stone prison where you'll supposedly learn to channel your dangerous desires toward Christ instead. Convents in medieval Europe served many functions, spiritual centers, schools, hospitals, but everyone knows their dirty little secret. They're also dumping grounds for inconvenient women, daughters who showed too much spirit, wives who enjoyed their marriage beds too enthusiastically before becoming widows, girls who developed curves too early and attracted too much attention. The church presents it as offering these women a chance at holy redemption. Your family presents it as the only alternative to complete social ruin. The day begins at 2 a.m. with Matins prayers. You stumble from your freezing cell, and it is a cell, complete with bars on the tiny window, to kneel on stone floors while your knees scream in protest. The schedule is deliberately exhausting. 7 prayer sessions daily, each lasting at least an hour, with manual labor, minimal food, and constant supervision filling the gaps between. The theory is simple. Exhaust the body, and you'll exhaust its desires. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. But it does produce hallucinations from sleep deprivation that the nuns interpret as divine visions. Your fellow inmates, sisters, come from similar backgrounds. There's Lady Isabella, whose husband died suspiciously after catching her with a traveling merchant. The official story is she's here to pray for his soul. The unofficial story involves poison and a hasty cover-up by her influential family. There's young Beatrice, barely 14, who made the mistake of being too beautiful and too poor to defend herself from noble attention. Her presence here is framed as protecting her virtue, though everyone knows it's really about removing temptation from the Lord's Son, who wouldn't leave her alone. The rules designed to suppress sexuality would be comedic if they weren't so cruel. No mirrors, because vanity leads to lust. No warm baths, because heat inflames passion. No pets, because affection for animals might awaken other affections. No singing except hymns, because secular melodies stir the blood. No friendships that are too particular. The Mother Superior has a sixth sense for detecting any warmth between sisters that goes beyond Christian charity. But here's what the Church Fathers didn't count on. Put a bunch of women together, away from male supervision, and they find ways to subvert every rule. The convent becomes a strange sort of sanctuary where women can discuss things they'd never dare mention in the outside world, in whispered conversations during kitchen duty. Older nuns share knowledge about herbs that ease menstrual cramps and others that prevent pregnancy. During long hours copying manuscripts, sisters slip notes to each other about dreams that definitely aren't focused on Christ's passion. The punishments for infractions are severe, Sister Catherine spent 3 days in the punishment cell for laughing too loudly. The cell is a stone box, barely large enough to lie down in, with no light and bread and water rations. Sister Joan received 50 lashes for possessing a small mirror. The whipping happened in front of the entire convent, her back bared, while the Mother Superior lectured about the dangers of vanity between strokes. The real cruelty is the spiritual manipulation. Every natural feeling gets twisted into evidence of demonic influence. Feel hungry? That's gluttony tempting you. Miss your family? That's worldly attachment blocking your path to God. Dream about anything besides Jesus. Better confess immediately before Satan takes hold completely. The constant message is that your female body is a battleground between good and evil, and any pleasure or comfort feeds the wrong side. Historians note that many medieval convents functioned as places of genuine learning and relative female autonomy. Some women found real purpose and power within these walls, but for every Hildegard of Bingen composing mystical music, there were dozens of Margarets and Beatrices slowly going mad from isolation and suppression. The historical record tends to focus on the success stories, but the account books tell a different tale. Purchases of chains for the difficult sisters, payments to doctors for treating hysteria, construction costs for more punishment cells. You learn to survive by becoming invisible. Keep your eyes down, your voice soft, your movements mechanical. Hide any spark of personality or passion beneath layers of performed piety. Some women break entirely, becoming the holy automatons their families wanted. Others find tiny rebellions, an extra morsel of bread hidden in their sleeve, a pressed flower tucked in their prayer book, a moment of sunshine savoured on their face during garden work. You're browsing the blacksmith stall at the fair when you spot it, a small iron contraption displayed between the horseshoes and cooking pots. The merchant quickly covers it with a cloth when he sees you looking, but you recognize the shape. It's one of those chastity belts that everyone whispers about but no one admits to buying. The travelling merchant winks and quotes an outrageous price, claiming it's imported from Italy, where all the noble husbands lock up their wives before going on crusade. Here's the thing about medieval chastity belts that might surprise you. They're mostly mythical. Yes, you heard that correctly. Those elaborate iron underwear contraptions that show up in every museum of medieval torture. Most historians now agree they're either Victorian forgeries or Renaissance novelty items. The medieval period was certainly obsessed with controlling female sexuality, but they preferred methods that didn't involve custom metalwork and intimate measurements. The earliest reliable mention of anything resembling a chastity belt comes from Conrad Kieser's Bellifortis in 1405, right at the tail end of the medieval period. He describes it as a joke, a satirical commentary on jealous husbands. The accompanying illustration shows a device so impractical that wearing it for more than a few hours would cause severe injury. Metal and flesh don't play nicely together, especially in intimate areas, a fact that apparently escaped Victorian museum curators, but not medieval people who actually worked with both. But the myth persists because it fits so perfectly with everything else you know about medieval attitudes toward female sexuality. If they're willing to publicly shame women for experiencing pleasure, prescribe toxic herbs to suppress desire, and lock daughters in convents for smiling at boys, then iron underwear seems like a logical next step. The chastity belt becomes a symbol, a physical manifestation of all the invisible chains medieval society uses to control women's bodies. The real chastity protection methods of the medieval period were far more mundane and far more effective. Constant supervision worked better than any lock. Noble ladies travelled with entire retinues of servants, companions, and relatives whose primary job was to ensure she was never alone with any man except her husband. Poor women had the neighbourhood surveillance network. Good luck finding a private moment when 12 people share 2 rooms and everyone knows everyone else's business. For travelling or situations where supervision wasn't possible, medieval people relied on sealed letters and tokens. A wife might wear a ring that would supposedly change colour if she was unfaithful. It didn't, but the placebo effect was strong. Some women carried special pilgrim badges that declared their holy purpose and theoretically protected them from assault, though effectiveness varied wildly depending on who you encountered on the road. The actual metal workers of the period find the chastity belt concept either hilarious or horrifying when merchants suggest it. Can you imagine trying to create a custom-fitted iron garment for such a sensitive area? The measuring alone would be scandalously intimate. The craftsmanship required would be extraordinary. Hinges that don't pinch, locks that don't rust, metal smooth enough not to cause sores, all for a device that would make basic bodily functions a nightmare and probably kill the wearer from infection within a week. But here's where it gets interesting. The myth of the chastity belt tells us something important about how we think about the medieval period. We want to believe they were barbaric enough to lock women in iron underwear, because it makes us feel enlightened by comparison. Look how far we've come. Except the real methods of sexual control, shame, surveillance, economic dependence, and social death translate pretty directly into modern times. We just don't need the dramatic iron props anymore. The merchant at the fair, seeing your interest hasn't completely died, leans in conspiratorially. Of course, if my lady is interested in protecting her virtue, I have other items, herbs to cool the blood, amulets blessed by holy men, special prayers guaranteed to suppress unwanted stirrings. These are the real chastity belts of the medieval world, psychological chains, spiritual locks, and chemical suppressants that don't leave visible marks but bind just as tightly. You politely decline and move on, but the image sticks with you. Later, historians will fill museums with these fantastical iron contraptions, turning medieval sexual control into a carnival sideshow. They'll miss the subtler cruelties, the quieter oppression, the way a whole society can become a chastity belt without anyone needing to forge a single link. The real locks were never made of iron. They were made of fear, shame, and the constant knowledge that your body was never truly your own. You slip into old Martha's cottage just as the sun sets, your hood pulled low, a basket of eggs providing your alibi if anyone asks. Inside, 3 other women huddle around the fire, speaking in whispers that stop abruptly when you enter. But Martha recognizes you. She delivered your first child, and nods toward an empty stool. Tonight, like every 3rd Thursday, is when the women share knowledge that could get them burned at the stake if the wrong person overheard. The underground network of women's knowledge in medieval times operates like a spy ring, complete with code words, secret signals, and deadly consequences for discovery. These informal gatherings pass down information the Church desperately wants suppressed: which herbs can prevent conception, how to enhance pleasure without arousing suspicion, ways to fake virginity on your wedding night, and remedies for the damage caused by too many pregnancies too close together. Martha begins tonight's lesson by pulling out a collection of dried herbs wrapped in cloth. "Pennyroyal for bringing on delayed monthly bleeding," she whispers, and everyone understands she means early-stage abortion, but never more than 3 leaves steeped in wine, or you'll bleed out entirely. She shows you how to identify the plant, where it grows wild, how to dry it without the leaves turning black and useless. This knowledge passes woman to woman, mother to daughter, midwife to patient. Never written down because literacy itself is suspicious in a woman. The next herb is Queen Anne's lace seeds, chewed immediately after intercourse to prevent conception. Some call it wild carrot, Martha explains, and if anyone asks, that's what you're growing it for, the roots for soup. She demonstrates the exact motion for crushing the seeds between your teeth to release their contraceptive properties. Modern science has actually validated this one. The seeds contain compounds that block progesterone synthesis. Medieval women figured out hormonal birth control centuries before anyone understood hormones. But herbs are just the beginning. The women share techniques for experiencing pleasure while maintaining the appearance of proper wifely submission. Agnes, the miller's wife, demonstrates how to position your hips during intercourse to increase sensation while appearing completely passive. Your husband thinks he's in control, she says with a sly smile, but you're the one directing the angle. Another woman shares how to use internal muscle contractions to enhance your own pleasure, while making your husband think he's simply irresistible. The knowledge extends to protecting yourself from the church's invasive investigations. They teach you how to fake the signs of virginity, a vial of chicken blood hidden in your hair, released at the crucial moment on your wedding night, how to appear properly chaste during confession while revealing nothing of substance, which priests are sympathetic and might prescribe lighter penances, and which ones report everything to the bishop. It's a complex intelligence network focused on survival. These meetings also serve as impromptu medical clinics for problems no male physician would understand or care about. Women describe symptoms in euphemisms. My garden has been overwatered means excessive menstrual bleeding. The gate won't close properly refers to prolapsed uterus from too many births. Winter has come early indicates premature menopause. Martha and the other experienced women suggest remedies, comfort, and practical solutions that acknowledge the reality of women's bodies rather than treating them as theological problems. The danger of discovery looms constantly. Just last year, a similar gathering in the next village was raided after someone's daughter confessed to the priest about her mother's strange tea. 3 women burned as witches, their real crime being knowledge. So you develop elaborate precautions. Always meet during church-sanctioned feast days when gatherings are expected. Always have an innocent activity ready as cover, spinning, preserving, prayer circles. Always post a lookout who can signal if anyone approaches. Historians debate how widespread these networks were, but evidence suggests they existed across Europe in various forms. The Church's own records, ironically, provide proof. Countless sermons warning against women's gossip and dangerous female friendships. Prohibitions against midwives sharing certain knowledge. Trial records where women are accused of teaching each other secrets of the body. What they called conspiracy, you call survival. The meeting ends as they always do, with each woman taking a different route home, leaving at staggered intervals. You tuck a small packet of seeds into your sleeve, memorize the brewing instructions Martha whispered, and step back into the night. Tomorrow you'll see these same women at church, at market, in the streets, and you'll never acknowledge what you share. The knowledge stays hidden, passed in whispers and demonstrations, surviving despite every effort to stamp it out. Because no matter how many women they burn, shame, or lock away, bodies keep having the same needs, the same desires, the same capacity for pleasure that no amount of theology can pray away. The morning light reveals a peculiar sight in the market square. Rosalind the prostitute haggling with the cloth merchant over the price of fine wool, while the merchant's own wife stands 3 stalls away, pretending not to see. Everyone knows Rosalind's profession. From the yellow hood the law requires her to wear to the house she works from on Cox Lane. Yes, that's the real name. And no, it's not a coincidence. Yet here she is, conducting business like any respectable townswoman, because medieval society's relationship with prostitution is complicated beyond belief. Prostitutes occupy the strangest social position imaginable in medieval Europe. They're simultaneously essential and reviled, protected and persecuted, regulated and condemned. The church preaches that they're damned souls leading men into sin, while city councils issue them licenses and collect taxes on their earnings. Bishops thunder from pulpits about the evils of fornication, then quietly suggest that closing the brothels would lead to worse sins, like sodomy or the corruption of honest wives. The justification comes from St. Augustine himself, who compared prostitutes to sewers, disgusting but necessary to prevent worse filth from backing up into decent homes. Thomas Aquinas refined the argument, claiming prostitutes prevent rape, adultery, and unnatural acts by providing an outlet for male lust. Notice how it's always about managing male desire. Women's sexuality remains dangerous and problematic, whether they're selling it or giving it away for free. Your town has an official brothel on Cox Lane, operated under strict regulations that would make modern bureaucrats dizzy. The women must wear identifying clothing. Yellow hoods here, striped cloaks in other towns, special badges in Venice. They can't attend church during regular services, but must sit in a designated section during special prostitute-only masses. They can't marry or live outside designated areas, can't wear fur or silk or jewelry, can't shop at certain markets or walk on certain streets. But here's where it gets interesting. These same regulations also protect prostitutes in ways other women can only dream of. Rosalind can sue clients who don't pay. Try doing that as a wife seeking her household allowance. She can bring charges against men who beat her, while wives have no recourse against abusive husbands. She controls her own money, owns property in her own name, and can make legal contracts without male permission. In some jurisdictions, attacking a prostitute carries heavier penalties than attacking a respectable woman because she's considered under special protection of the crown. The economics are fascinating too. A successful prostitute can earn more than most craftsmen, and certainly more than any other profession available to women. Some save enough to buy their way into respectable widowhood, inventing dead husbands and tragic backstories. Others become madams, running their own establishments and growing wealthy enough to make substantial donations to the very churches that condemn them. The city council members who publicly decry vice privately count on brothel taxes to fund public works. But don't mistake regulation for acceptance. The contradictions run deep and deadly. During Lent, many cities close brothels entirely, forcing women into temporary homelessness. When plague strikes, prostitutes get blamed first and expelled from cities. If a prostitute gets pregnant, she faces impossible choices: abort and risk execution for infanticide, or give birth and watch the child taken away to be raised properly elsewhere. The protection of law evaporates the moment you step outside your designated role. Historians still argue about the demographics. Who became prostitutes in medieval times? The stereotypical answer is desperate women with no other choice. But the reality is more complex. Yes, poverty drives many into the profession: orphans, widows, women whose families can't afford dowries. But court records also show women choosing prostitution over domestic service because it pays better and offers more autonomy. Some are married women supplementing household income with their husband's knowledge. Others are migrants seeking fortune in cities. Finding the brothel offers better opportunities than washing laundry or spinning thread. The clientele spans every social class, creating awkward encounters like the one you're witnessing in the market. That cloth merchant haggling with Rosalind. His name appears in the brothel tax records. The priest who'll condemn her from the pulpit tomorrow. The madams keep careful accounts of which clergy need discreet service. The judge who'll fine her for wearing silk. He has a standing appointment every Tuesday. Everyone participates in the system while maintaining elaborate fictions about their moral superiority. You watch Rosalind complete her purchase, noting how the merchant's wife suddenly finds urgent business elsewhere, just as Rosalind approaches her stall. The dance of proximity and distance, acknowledgement and denial, continues. Prostitutes exist in plain sight, but must be constantly unseen. Essential to the city's function, but blamed for its every moral failing. They absorb society's hypocrisies about sex, desire, and women's bodies, performing a role that everyone needs but no one wants to admit needing. Lady Eleanor's letter arrives hidden in a shipment of Flemish cloth. Its seal unbroken, but clearly steamed open and resealed by at least 3 different people along its journey. You recognize her handwriting despite the coded language. She's asking if you remember the hunting party last autumn when the stag escaped. You remember perfectly. The stag was her code name for Sir William, and the hunting party was their series of passionate encounters that nearly cost her everything when her husband grew suspicious. Noble women playing the game of courtly love navigate a minefield where one wrong step means destruction. The rules are elaborate and contradictory. You must be beautiful enough to inspire devotion, but not so beautiful. You're accused of witchcraft. You should engage in romantic correspondence, but never admit to physical consummation. You can have a lover who writes you poetry and wears your colors in tournaments, but God help you if anyone catches you actually touching. Eleanor's affair followed the typical pattern of noble adultery, carefully orchestrated, desperately risky, and ultimately doomed. It started innocently enough at a feast where Sir William, a younger son with good looks but no lands, began the elaborate ritual of courtly love. He sent poems comparing her eyes to stars, original, performed feats of strength in her honor, and generally made a spectacle of his devotion, while everyone pretended not to notice. The progression from courtly admirer to actual lover requires skills that would impress modern spy agencies. Secret meetings demand cooperation from numerous servants, all of whom must be bribed, threatened, or genuinely loyal enough to risk their own lives. Eleanor developed an elaborate system. Her confessor, bought with gold, would arrange for her to make pilgrimages to various shrines. Sir William would coincidentally need to travel the same roads, and her lady's maid would develop convenient illnesses requiring Eleanor to stop at particular inns. But noble affairs carry unique dangers beyond those faced by common women. Your bloodline is currency, your womb is political property, and your husband has significantly more resources for surveillance and revenge. Eleanor's husband employed a network of spies that rivaled the king's intelligence service. He had her followed, her letters intercepted, her servants questioned under torture. The miracle is that the affair lasted as long as it did, nearly 6 months of stolen moments and constant terror. When discovery finally came, the consequences were swift and brutal. Not for Sir William, of course. He suffered some social embarrassment, and had to leave court for a year. But Eleanor, her husband locked her in a tower for 3 months while deciding whether to kill her or just destroy her life. He chose the latter. She lost her children, her property, her position at court. The official story was that she'd retired to a convent to pray for her sins. The reality was house arrest on a remote estate with guards who reported her every movement. The truly maddening part is how the same noble society that destroyed Eleanor celebrated male adultery as proof of virility. Her husband's numerous mistresses were open secrets, their children acknowledged and provided for. The Duke of Burgundy kept 3 concurrent mistresses and wrote poetry about it. King Edward's bastards received titles and lands, but a noble woman who dared pursue her own desires. Unforgivable. Historians debate whether courtly love literature reflected reality or created it. Did noble women really risk everything for passion? Or was it all elaborate fantasy? The answer seems to be both. The songs and stories created a cultural script that some brave or foolish women tried to follow. The tradition of the courts of love, where noble ladies would judge elaborate questions of romantic etiquette, provided a semi-acceptable outlet for discussing desire. But step from theory to practice, and the game turned deadly. You draft your response to Eleanor carefully, using the agreed-upon code. The autumn woods remain beautiful, but too dangerous for hunting. The gamekeepers have become more vigilant. Translation: I remember your affair fondly, but warn you against trying again. The surveillance has increased. You'll send it through 3 intermediaries, sealed with wax that will show any tampering. Your own marriage remains cordial but cold, an economic alliance that produced the required heirs. You've been careful, limiting yourself to the kind of courtly admiration that never progresses beyond poetry and meaningful glances. But Eleanor's letter reminds you of what you're missing: the intoxication of real desire, the thrill of bodies that choose each other, rather than being contractually obligated. You burn the letter immediately after reading, watching the evidence of female desire turn to ash. Some things are too dangerous to keep, even in code. You're helping your neighbor Agnes harvest barley when she mentions, almost casually, that her sister in the next village got caught tumbling in the hay with the miller's son. They made her do penance, of course, Agnes says, wiping sweat from her brow. But nothing like what happened to Lady Catherine. 3 Hail Marys and a small fine. Must be nice being poor sometimes. She's joking, but there's truth beneath the humor. The rules governing female sexuality shift dramatically depending on which rung of society's ladder you occupy. Peasant women navigate a different sexual landscape than their noble sisters, one that's simultaneously more permissive and more brutal. The Church's elaborate restrictions on when and how married couples can have sex. Good luck enforcing that when entire families sleep in one room. The careful choreography required for noble affairs. Hard to manage when you're working sunrise to sunset just to survive. The preservation of bloodlines and inheritance. Less critical when you own nothing but the clothes on your back and a few scrawny chickens. This doesn't mean peasant women enjoy sexual freedom, far from it. But the forms of control differ. Your body is policed less by abstract theology and more by immediate practical concerns. Can you still work the fields while pregnant? Will another mouth to feed doom the family to starvation? Is this marriage alliance necessary to combine 2 small plots into one survivable farm? The punishment for sexual transgression might not involve tower imprisonment, but it could mean being cast out to starve. The village community operates as judge and jury for sexual behavior, applying standards that blend church teaching with practical peasant wisdom. Take young Mary, who everyone knows has been meeting Tom behind the mill. As long as they marry before her belly shows, the community collectively develops amnesia about the timeline. But let Mary's eye wander to multiple men. Or worse, to someone already married, and she'll face the full fury of village justice, rough music outside her door, exclusion from common resources, maybe a beating from the wronged wife's relatives. Peasant women also face unique vulnerabilities. The Lord's rite of first night with new brides might be officially condemned by the church. But good luck refusing when your family's tenancy depends on his goodwill. Historians debate how common this practice really was. Some claim it's mostly myth. Others point to court records showing compensation paid for damaged brides. Either way, the threat hangs over every peasant wedding, another reminder that your body belongs to everyone except yourself. The seasonal patterns of agricultural life create their own sexual rhythms. Winter nights are long and cold, leading to predictable baby booms in autumn. Harvest time brings communal work and festivals where normal rules relax slightly. A bit of drunken fumbling in the fields might be forgiven if it doesn't become habitual. May Day celebrations explicitly encourage fertility rituals that would be condemned any other time of year. The church tries to suppress these pagan holdovers, but peasant communities cling to them fiercely. Working alongside men in the fields creates a different dynamic than the artificial separation of noble life. You develop calluses and muscles that mark you as a laborer, making the delicate flower ideal of femininity impossible to achieve even if you wanted to. The physical demands of peasant life mean women who survive multiple pregnancies and still work the harvest are tough as leather. That toughness sometimes translates into sexual agency, not freedom exactly, but a pragmatic approach to bodily needs. The remedies and punishments for sexual transgressions among peasants tend toward the practical rather than theological. Can't afford church penance fees? The village priest might assign extra labor instead, cleaning the church, working the glebe lands, spinning thread for altar cloths. Caught in adultery? You might face rough justice from the community, a charivari parade, dunking in the pond, temporary exile. But you're unlikely to lose property you never had. Agnes continues her observations as you work. My grandmother used to say noble ladies got locked up for loving, but peasant women just got locked out. She's describing the practice of communal shunning, where a woman who violates sexual norms finds herself excluded from the reciprocal networks that make survival possible. No one will help with your harvest. No one will share fire when yours goes out. No one will watch your children while you work. It's a slow social death that can turn quickly literal. But peasant communities also protect their own in ways noble society doesn't. That underground network of women's knowledge runs especially strong among peasants, who can't afford doctors anyway. Midwives pass down generations of practical wisdom about managing fertility, easing births, and yes, enhancing pleasure when possible. The herbs grow wild and free, available to those who know where to look. The church may preach submission, but peasant women share secrets about making the best of whatever submission is required. You're copying manuscripts in the Abbey scriptorium when you notice it. A tiny illustration in the margin of a religious text, showing a woman riding a rooster while holding a disturbingly large fish. Sister Marguerite quickly covers it with her sleeve when she sees you looking, but later, during evening prayers, she slips you a note. The rooster crows at dawn, the fish swims upstream. You've just been inducted into the secret world of medieval women's coded literature, where female desire hides in plain sight through symbols, metaphors, and terrible puns. Medieval literature is full of these hidden messages, created by and for women who couldn't openly discuss their sexuality without facing severe consequences. The official texts, religious treatises, moral instruction, approved poetry, all preach the same message. Women should be chaste, silent, and obedient, but in the margins, between the lines, and through cleverly chosen imagery, female authors and scribes tell different stories entirely. Take Marie de France, writing in the 12th century. Her lay, short narrative poems, supposedly teach moral lessons about courtly love. But read closely, and you'll find women actively pursuing their desires, choosing their lovers, and outwitting husbands and fathers. In Yonek, a woman locked in a tower by her jealous husband takes a shape-shifting hawk as her lover. The Church interprets this as a cautionary tale about female lust leading to tragedy. Women readers understand it differently. Sometimes a hawk is just a hawk, but sometimes it's a meditation on the lengths women go to find pleasure in captivity. The Romance of the Rose, one of the most popular texts of the medieval period, becomes a battleground for coded discussions of female sexuality. The first part, written by Guillaume de Lorris, presents the standard male fantasy of conquering the symbolic rose of female virginity. But when Christine de Pizan writes her response, she fills it with double meanings that slash at male assumptions. Her rose has thorns, preferences, and agency. She describes gardens where women cultivate their own pleasure, ostensibly talking about actual horticulture while writing detailed instructions about female anatomy. Even religious texts become vehicles for coded female desire. Female mystics like Marjorie Kempe write about their spiritual experiences in language that would make modern romance novelists blush. Their mystical unions with Christ involve trembling, burning, flowing, and ecstatic surrender. The Church celebrates these accounts as proof of divine connection, but women reading them recognize descriptions of physical experiences the Church claims they're not supposed to have or want. The margin illustrations tell their own stories. Nuns copying texts add doodles that would scandalize if anyone looked closely. A snail, representing slow, patient sexuality, pursuing a knight, male aggression tamed. Women riding backwards on various animals, suggesting positions the Church forbids. Rabbits everywhere, officially symbols of fertility, unofficially representing something much more specific about female pleasure. The pictures become a visual code passed between generations of religious women who can't speak their thoughts aloud. Books of Hours, personal prayer books owned by wealthy women, contain some of the most subversive imagery, commissioned by women, illustrated by artists who knew their audience. These books hide sensual messages in religious scenes. Saint Agatha's martyrdom, she had her breast cut off, becomes a meditation on female bodily autonomy. The Virgin Mary's garden blooms with flowers that just happen to be the same herbs midwives prescribe for enhancing pleasure or preventing conception. The troubadour tradition provides another avenue for coded female expression. While male poets sing of unattainable ladies on pedestals, female troubadours, yes, they existed, though the Church tried hard to erase them, sing very different songs. The Comtesse de Deer writes about choosing lovers based on their skill in bed, not their noble titles. She describes wanting a man who knows the art of love's battle. And she's not talking about writing poetry. These songs spread through courts and taverns, memorized and shared by women who add their own verses. Even conduct manuals, those dreary texts telling women how to be perfect wives, become sites of resistance. Anonymous female authors slip in advice that sounds proper, but contains subversive messages. Always obey your husband's wishes in the bedchamber might be followed by detailed descriptions of positions that maximize female pleasure while appearing submissive. Keep your bedroom clean and sweet-smelling leads to recipes for herbal preparations that just happen to increase sensitivity. You finish copying your assigned text and add your own small illustration in the margin. A woman holding a mirror that reflects not her face, but a blooming rose. Sister Marguerite nods approvingly. Future scholars will probably interpret it as vanity leading to downfall. But you and your sisters know it means something else entirely. The power of seeing and knowing your own desire, reflected back without shame. The coded language continues, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who know how to read between the lines. You sit in the physician's examination room, watching him prepare his instruments while your mother hovers anxiously nearby. It's 1485, technically still the medieval period, but you might as well be in 2020. For all that's changed, the doctor is about to perform a virginity test because your betrothed's family demands proof of your purity. The specific humiliation might have evolved, but the core message remains constant. Your body is not your own. Your pleasure is dangerous, and your sexuality requires constant surveillance and control. The legacy of medieval attitudes toward female sexuality didn't vanish with the Renaissance. It evolved, adapted, and embedded itself so deeply in Western culture that we're still digging it out. That physician examining you, his modern counterpart might use different tools and terminology, but women still report doctors dismissing their sexual concerns, pathologizing normal desire, or asking invasive questions about their purity. The vocabulary changed from wandering womb to hysteria to female sexual dysfunction, but the underlying assumption remains: women's bodies are problems to be solved. Consider how modern purity culture mirrors medieval virgin mother whore categories with uncanny precision. Promise rings replace chastity belts. Abstinence-only education echoes medieval confession manuals. And purity balls recreate the same patriarchal ownership of female sexuality that medieval fathers exercised. Young women today still receive the message that their value decreases with sexual experience, that their desires are dangerous, that their bodies are commodities whose worth depends on exclusive access. The surveillance has gone digital but serves the same purpose. Where medieval communities relied on nosy neighbors and church confessions, we have social media stalking and revenge porn. Where medieval authorities conducted bedroom inspections, we have legislators mandating transvaginal ultrasounds. Where medieval crowds gathered for slut-shaming parades, we have online harassment campaigns designed to punish women for expressing sexuality. The technology is new. The impulse to control and punish female desire remains medieval. Medical attitudes carry particularly persistent echoes. The medieval belief that women's bodies are inherently pathological continues in how medicine treats female sexuality. Hormonal birth control side effects get dismissed as acceptable trade-offs. Sexual pain disorders go undiagnosed for years because some discomfort is normal. The medieval physician who prescribed bloodletting for excessive female desire has evolved into the modern doctor who assumes women claiming high libidos must have psychological issues. Different century, Same fundamental discomfort with women who want and enjoy sex. Legal double standards persist with remarkable consistency. Rape laws still focus on women's behavior, clothing, and sexual history. Medieval questions about whether she encouraged assault through her actions. Adultery might not lead to head shaving and public parades, but divorced women still face economic devastation, while unfaithful husbands rebuild easily. Sex work remains criminalized in ways that punish women while barely touching male clients. The specific punishments evolved. The gendered application of justice didn't. The witch hunts never really ended. They just changed targets. Women with sexual agency still face accusations of corrupting men, destroying families, undermining social order. Instead of literal witch trials, we have moral panics about everything from rock music to yoga pants, always focused on how women's choices threaten civilization. The sexually confident woman remains a figure of fear, requiring constant attempts at suppression and control. But here's the twist that medieval authorities never saw coming. Women kept talking to each other. That underground network of forbidden knowledge, those coded messages in manuscript margins, those whispered conversations about herbs and pleasure, they evolved into feminist movements, comprehensive sex education, and reproductive rights activism. The same impulse that led medieval women to share contraceptive knowledge in secret now drives women to share their stories publicly, demanding better from medicine, law, and society. Modern technology amplifies both oppression and resistance. Yes, surveillance is easier, but so is organizing. Yes, harassment can go viral, but so can solidarity. Women today access information about their bodies and pleasure that medieval women could only dream of, even as they fight modern versions of ancient restrictions. The battlefield shifted from confession boxes to comment sections, but the war between women's autonomy and societal control continues. You think about Eleanor locked in her tower, Margaret paraded through the streets, the unnamed thousands who suffered for the crime of experiencing desire. Their struggles weren't futile, they were foundational. Every woman who insisted on her own pleasure despite consequences, who shared forbidden knowledge despite risks, who found joy in her body despite condemnation, contributed to a slow revolution we're still fighting today. The examination ends. Your purity, certified for a price. You'll marry. Navigate the same impossible standards. Face the same fundamental message that your sexuality is everyone's business but your own. But you'll also carry forward that ancient knowledge that your desires are real, valid, and yours, that other women share your struggles, that the rules designed to contain you can be bent, broken, and eventually rewritten. The medieval period might be ending, but the work of claiming female sexual autonomy has barely begun.